On the night of July 19th, 2026, at the New York, New Jersey Stadium in East Rutherford, Argentina, lost the World Cup final to Spain. And what happened after the whistle was worse than the loss itself. Players grabbing throats, punches thrown, backs turned on the champions. A tournament that had already been dragged through political banners, presidential phone calls, and a red card overturned by the White House. And then, a few days later, a private letter leaked. A letter from the most powerful man in football. A letter that praised the very team his own organization was busy investigating for the exact behavior nobody could stop watching. This is the story of Gianni Infantino's leaked letter to Argentina, and why one word in it made the entire football world stop and ask what on earth is going on at the top of this sport. Let's start at the end, because the ending is where all of this begins. The 2026 World Cup was the biggest in history, and a final that pitted the defending champions, Lionel Messi's Argentina, against a Spanish side that had spent 2 years steamrolling everyone in front of them. On paper, it should have been a classic. In reality, Spain simply dominated. Luis de la Fuente's team controlled the ball, controlled the tempo, and limited Argentina to just 2 shots across 120 minutes of football. That is an almost unbelievable statistic for a World Cup final. 2 shots from a team built around the greatest attacking players of a generation. The game stayed goalless through 90 minutes. It went to extra time. And in the 106th minute, a substitute named Ferran Torres, who had come off the bench, pounced on a bouncing ball inside the box and buried it with his left foot, just under the crossbar. 1-0. Spain were champions of the world for the second time in their history, adding to the trophy they won back in 2010. Torres said afterward that the goal belonged to 47 million people. He meant the population of Spain. It was a beautiful line. A romantic line. The kind of thing you say when destiny has just tapped you on the shoulder. But there was another story unfolding on that pitch. A darker one. Because this had not been a clean final. It had been, in the words of one report, a bad-tempered one marred by a red card. In the 3rd minute of second-half stoppage time, Argentina's Enzo Fernández, the Chelsea midfielder and a 2022 World Cup winner, went in recklessly on Spain's young defender Pau Cubarsí. The referee, Slavko Vincic, had no choice. Second yellow. Red card. Argentina were down to 10 men, and the frustration that had been building all night had nowhere left to go. So when the final whistle blew, it exploded. What happened in those minutes after Spain lifted the trophy is the thing that turned a football result into an international incident. Several members of Argentina's team and coaching staff got involved in physical and verbal altercations with Spanish players. Leandro Paredes appeared to grab Eric Garcia by the throat. He appeared to throw Gavi to the ground. His teammate Nahuel Molina appeared to throw a punch in the direction of Spain's captain, Rodri. And then, as Rodri finally lifted the World Cup toward the sky, most of the Argentina camp turned their backs. They refused to watch. They refused to acknowledge it. For a lot of neutral viewers, that image, a beaten team turning away from the champions during the single most important moment of the tournament, was more damning than any punch. It looked like sourness. It looked like a refusal to accept a fair defeat. And it went around the world within minutes. FIFA, the sport's governing body, responded the way it is supposed to respond. It opened an investigation. And here is where you need to pay very close attention, because this is the machinery that makes the leaked letter so strange. In a statement released shortly after the final, FIFA said that following an assessment of the relevant match reports, and in line with Article 36 of the FIFA Disciplinary Code, its disciplinary committee had appointed a disciplinary and ethics prosecutor to investigate potential breaches with regard to the post-match incidents. The investigation was looking at what FIFA described as offensive behavior and violations of the principles of fair play, and misconduct of players and officials. The players reportedly named in connection with the violent conduct included Paredes, Molina, Thiago Almada, and even the assistant coach Roberto Ayala. So let that settle for a second. FIFA's own prosecutors were actively building a case. A formal disciplinary process was in motion. No timeline for a verdict was disclosed, but the wheels were turning. FIFA said further details would be communicated once the prosecutor's report had been completed. The team was, in the eyes of its own governing body, under a cloud. And it did not end with the brawl, because the anger from the public was enormous. A petition calling for Argentina to be banned from future tournaments gained more than 23 million signatures. 23 million. That is not a typo. That is one of the largest sports petitions anyone has ever seen. Argentina fans fired back with a counter-petition demanding the final be replayed, accusing the referee of corruption, although it needs to be said clearly that there was nothing whatsoever to suggest FIFA or the referee had done anything wrong. There was no evidence of any bribe. There was no evidence of any corruption in that match. It was simply a fan base in pain, lashing out. Even the politicians got involved. Argentina's president, Javier Milei, went on the offensive. He launched into a defense of his country that raised as many eyebrows as it soothed. He claimed the real problem with Argentina was that it stands out, that people are jealous, that Argentines are good at almost everything, and someone had to say it. Meanwhile, the head of the Argentine Football Association, Claudio Tapia, known to everyone as Chiqui, took a more measured approach and called on fans to accept Spain's victory. Now hold that name in your head, Claudio Tapia, Chiqui, because he is the man on the receiving end of the letter we are about to talk about. But before we get to the letter, we have to go back a few days earlier in the tournament, to the semifinal, because the final was not the first time Argentina had detonated a controversy in America. And this earlier one matters, because it forms part of the exact same pattern that makes Infantino's words so difficult to explain. On July 15, 2026, at the Atlanta Stadium, Argentina played England in the semifinal. It was a heavyweight fixture loaded with more than a century of bad blood, from the Beckham red card in 1998, all the way back to a quarterfinal in 1966 that left an English manager calling the Argentine players animals. This is not a normal rivalry. This is a rivalry soaked in history and in one very specific wound. Argentina came from behind to win that semifinal 2-1. And in the celebrations, on the pitch, in front of the cameras and the fans, a group of players unfurled a banner. The banner read, "Las Malvinas son Argentinas." In English, the Falklands are Argentine. Defender Lisandro Martinez and the unused substitute Giovanni Lo Celso were among those holding it up, grinning, waving to the crowd. And for anyone who understands the history, it landed like a grenade. The Falkland Islands, known in Argentina as Las Malvinas, are a British overseas territory roughly 300 miles off the southern tip of Argentina. In 1982, Argentina's then military dictatorship invaded them. That invasion triggered a war with Britain that lasted about 10 weeks. By the end of it, 649 Argentine servicemen were dead. 255 British servicemen were dead. 3 islanders were dead. This is not ancient history. There are still people alive today on both sides who carry that war with them every single day. So to raise a sovereignty banner on a football pitch in front of a global audience after beating England of all teams was always going to cause a firestorm. And it did. The British government urged FIFA to investigate. A spokesperson for Prime Minister Keir Starmer delivered a line that made headlines everywhere, saying that the World Cup might not be theirs, but the Falkland Islands definitely were. FIFA opened an inquiry because displaying a political banner is a clear violation of its stadium code of conduct. FIFA rules flatly prohibit political statements at its matches. And here is the part that tells you this was not an accident or a one-off. Argentina had done almost exactly the same thing before. Back in 2014, ahead of that year's World Cup, Argentine players held up the very same slogan before a friendly against Slovenia. FIFA fined them for it. So in 2026, everybody involved knew the rules. Everybody knew the history. And the banner went up anyway. Milei, the president, called the celebration perfectly valid. He said it reflected a sentiment shared by all Argentines, but even he admitted he expected FIFA to hand out a fine. The vice president, Victoria Villarruel, went further, sharing a photo of the players with the banner and openly cheering it on, having already stoked the fire before kickoff by describing the English in inflammatory terms. So now you have the full picture of Argentina's tournament as it looked from the outside. a politically explosive banner in the semi-final that dragged two governments into a football match, a brawl in the final. Players turning their backs on the champions, two separate FIFA investigations, a 23 million signature petition to ban them, and a president at home insisting everyone else was just jealous. That is the team. That is the situation. That is the atmosphere. And into that atmosphere, Gianni Infantino sent a letter. Now, before we read it, you need to understand who Gianni Infantino is and why his words carry the weight they do. Infantino is the president of FIFA, the single most powerful position in world football. He is a Swiss-Italian lawyer who rose through the ranks of UEFA, European football's governing body, before taking over FIFA in February of 2016. He succeeded Sepp Blatter, who had been suspended as the organization was being torn apart by a corruption scandal that saw leading officials arrested. Infantino came in promising a cleaner, more modern FIFA. His own history has not always been quiet. His name once surfaced in the Panama Papers leak, connected to a broadcasting contract he had co-signed years earlier during his time at UEFA. He denied any wrongdoing, and it is worth stating plainly that co-signing a contract is not itself proof of anything improper. But the point is that Infantino is a man who understands, better than almost anyone alive, how a leaked document can be read, reread, and weaponized. He of all people knows what happens when private words become public, which is what makes this next part so remarkable. The letter was addressed to Claudio Tapia, the president of the Argentine Football Association. It was, in one sense, a routine gesture. FIFA's president traditionally writes to the football associations of the three nations who finish in the top three of a World Cup. This year, that meant Spain, who won, Argentina, who finished second, and England, who took third place after beating France in a wild playoff. So a letter to Tapia was, on its face, protocol. Nothing unusual about that at all. The problem was not that the letter existed. The problem was what it said. As first reported by Argentine media and later verified by the Daily Mail, Infantino wrote to Tapia and told him that on Sunday, July 19th, at the magnificent New York, New Jersey Stadium, Argentina had won the silver medal of the 2026 World Cup after an exciting final against Spain. He offered his most sincere congratulations for what he called an important new result for Argentine soccer. He described the tournament as an unforgettable celebration of football, marked by spectacular matches and an extraordinary atmosphere. He said the magnificent performance of the Albiceleste, the nickname for the Argentine national team, had contributed decisively to making the edition an exceptional event. And then he asked Tapia to pass on his congratulations to everyone who contributed, to the players, to the coach, Lionel Scaloni, to the coaching and medical staff, and to the fans. Then came the sentence that stopped everyone cold. Infantino wrote that these victories are always the fruit of constant work, professionalism, and attention to detail, but also of passion, commitment, and love for this wonderful sport. Professionalism. He used the word professionalism to describe a team whose players were, at that very moment, under formal investigation by his own organization for offensive behavior, for violations of the principles of fair play, and for misconduct. A team caught on camera grabbing throats and turning their backs on the champions. A team that had days earlier unfurled a political banner that FIFA itself was separately investigating. He closed the letter warmly. He wished Tapia all the best for the next competitions. He said he hoped to see him again very soon, and he signed off with the words, "With all my friendship, Gianni Infantino." With all my friendship. Now, you can read that letter two ways, and it is worth being fair about both. The generous reading is that this was pure protocol, a boilerplate template that goes out to the runners-up every single tournament, drafted by staff, signed at the top, and never intended for public eyes. Congratulate the team, thank the fans, wish them well, move on. Under that reading, the word professionalism is just filler. It is the kind of empty praise that appears in 1,000 corporate letters. It does not mean anything. It was never meant to be scrutinized line by line. The less generous reading is the one that lit up the internet. Under that reading, the head of world football sat down, or allowed his office to send in his name, a letter gushing about the professionalism of a squad his own prosecutors were building a case against. And he made no reference at all, not one word, not to the brawl, not to the banner, not to the 23 million people demanding a ban. He simply praised them, thanked them, and offered his friendship as if none of it had happened. That silence is what deepened the sense of bewilderment. It was not just that Infantino said something warm. It was that he said nothing about the elephant in the room, while his organization was formally treating that elephant as a disciplinary matter. The tone of the letter and the reality of the investigation could not be reconciled. They pointed in opposite directions, and Infantino was the man standing at the center of both. And this is where the timing turns from awkward into genuinely strange, because the letter did not appear in a vacuum. It landed at the end of a stretch of weeks in which Gianni Infantino's judgment had already been questioned around the world. To understand why football people reacted the way they did to this letter, you have to understand what had happened just before it. Rewind to the start of July, to the round of 16, and to a red card that turned into an international controversy involving the President of the United States. In a group stage match on July 1st, the United States forward Ferran Torres was sent off. He stepped on the ankle of an opponent, and the referee showed him red. Under FIFA's rules, a red card carries an automatic one-match suspension. That is the standard. That is written into the competition regulations. Balogun, the top scorer for the co-hosts, was set to miss the crucial knockout match against Belgium. And then the phone rang at FIFA. President Donald Trump called Gianni Infantino directly and asked him to review the suspension. Trump did not hide it. He confirmed it publicly, telling reporters in the Oval Office that he had spoken to Gianni, whom he called highly respected, and that he had asked for a review. He said that wasn't a foul. He took a victory lap on social media, thanking FIFA for reversing what he called a great injustice. And FIFA did reverse it. Or, more precisely, it suspended the effect of the red card, leaning on a provision called Article 27 that allows a judicial body to suspend the implementation of a disciplinary measure. The federation was fined instead. Balogun was cleared to play. The reaction was ferocious. Belgium's Football Association said it was astonished, disbelieving, and called the decision unprecedented, incomprehensible, and unjustifiable. It said the ruling contradicted FIFA's own rules and complained it had not even been given the reasoning behind it. Former England players lined up to condemn it. Wayne Rooney called it an absolute disgrace and said Infantino should be ashamed. Gary Neville said the decision absolutely stinks. And in perhaps the most cutting intervention of all, the former FIFA president Sepp Blatter, the very man Infantino had replaced, posted that red cards are not overturned by political phone calls. They are overturned by rules, evidence, and independent bodies. He asked, pointedly, what it meant when a US president intervenes and a player is suddenly cleared before a World Cup knockout match. He warned that football must never become a playground for political power. Now, whether or not you think that red card was harsh, and some analysts genuinely did, the optics were catastrophic. It looked to a huge portion of the football world like FIFA had bent its own rules because a powerful man made a phone call, and the man on the other end of that phone was Gianni Infantino. So put yourself back in the last week of July 2026 and look at the sequence through the eyes of an ordinary fan. First, FIFA appears to fold to a United States president over a red card. Then Argentina raise a war banner and brawl their way through the tournament while FIFA opens investigations. And then, in the middle of those investigations, the FIFA president's private letter leaks. And it turns out he was praising the professionalism of the team under investigation while saying nothing about any of it. Every one of those stories on its own is survivable. Stacked together, in the space of a few weeks, they built a picture. And the picture was of a governing body that seemed to say one thing in its official rulings and something completely different in its private correspondence. A body whose president appeared warm and generous to the powerful and the popular, while the machinery of discipline ground away in the background, seemingly disconnected from the man at the top. It is worth pausing here to be scrupulously fair, because that is what good storytelling actually demands. The letter by itself broke no rule. Writing to the runners-up is normal. Being polite is normal. There is a strong argument that a FIFA president simply should not comment on an active disciplinary case at all, and that a courteous, content-free letter is precisely the safe, neutral thing to send. You could argue that the real mistake was not the letter, but the leak. Someone inside the process chose to make a private ceremonial note public, specifically because they knew how it would look next to the investigation. In that sense, the letter is less a scandal and more a mirror, held up to reflect a tension that already existed. But that defense only goes so far. Because leadership is not only about the rules you follow, it is about the signals you send, and the signal here, intended or not, was that the head of world football could look at a team accused of throat-grabbing, punch-throwing, back-turning, and banner-waving, and find only professionalism and friendship to describe. When your own prosecutors are calling it misconduct, and you are calling it professionalism, you have created a contradiction that no protocol can fully explain away. And when you have spent the same month being accused of caving to political pressure over a red card, you have used up the benefit of the doubt that might otherwise have carried you through. FIFA's disciplinary process, for what it is worth, kept moving regardless of the letter. The prosecutor appointed under Article 36 continued examining the post-match disorder. No verdict had been announced. No timeline had been set. The investigation into the Falklands banner continued on its own separate track. In other words, the institution was still doing its job, even as its president's words seemed to undercut the seriousness of that job. And that is really the heart of this whole story. Not a single dramatic villain, not a smoking gun, but a governing body that seemed to be speaking with two voices at once. One voice, the cold, procedural voice of the disciplinary code, calling the behavior what it was. And another voice, warm and personal and signed with friendship, praising the very same people for their professionalism, as though the first voice did not exist. Football fans noticed. They always notice. Because supporters understand something that administrators sometimes forget. The sport does not just live in the results. It lives in the sense that the game is fair, that the rules mean the same thing for everyone, that a red card is a red card whether or not a president calls. That misconduct is misconduct whether or not the team is beloved. The moment fans start to feel that the powerful get letters of friendship while everyone else gets the rulebook, something precious starts to leak away. And no petition, no counter-petition, no investigation can put it back. Gianni Infantino has spent nearly a decade trying to steer FIFA out of the shadow of the corruption scandals that engulfed it before he arrived. He has, by many measures, delivered enormous tournaments and enormous revenues. The 2026 World Cup was the biggest ever staged, but a leaked letter, 3 short paragraphs of ceremonial praise, managed to concentrate every doubt about his tenure into a single word. Professionalism, used to describe the least professional 48 hours of the entire tournament. Whether that letter was a careless template signed without a second thought, or a genuine reflection of how the man at the top actually sees things, we may never truly know. That is the nature of a leak. It gives you the words, but not the intent. It gives you the sentence, but not the mind behind it. What we do know is this. On July 19th, 2026, Argentina lost a World Cup final and then lost their composure. FIFA opened an investigation. The public demanded consequences. And in the middle of all of it, the most powerful man in football sat down and wrote a letter of friendship and praise, said nothing about any of the ugliness, and had that letter read back to him by the entire world. Some documents are dangerous because of what they reveal. This one was dangerous because of what it refused to acknowledge. And in a sport that runs on the belief that the game is fair, a silence that loud can echo for a very long time. Like and subscribe for more deep dives into the biggest stories in football. Until next time.